The boarding pass reader let out a sharp, angry beep, the sound of rejection. In the hushed luxury of the first-class terminal at JFK, heads turned. Gavin Thorne, the regional manager for Aerolux, didn't even look at the screen. He looked at David Sterling's shoes, he looked at his wife's hoodie, he looked at their daughter's braided hair. With a sneer that was polite enough to avoid a lawsuit but cold enough to cut glass, Thorne handed the ticket back. "I think there's been a mistake," he said, loud enough for the line to hear. "The economy line is downstairs. You people can't afford this flight." He didn't know that the ink on the contract David signed yesterday was barely dry. He didn't know he was talking to his new boss. The air in the Aerolux first-class lounge at JFK Terminal 4 always smelled of expensive things: white tea, conditioned leather, and the specific, metallic scent of exclusivity. It was a place designed to make people feel separated from the world, a sanctuary where the chaos of travel was replaced by champagne flutes and soft jazz. David Sterling adjusted the strap of his worn leather duffel bag. He wasn't a man who broadcasted his status. Dressed in a pair of charcoal joggers, fresh white sneakers, and a plain black hoodie, he looked more like a tired father heading home from a gym session than a man whose net worth rivaled the GDP of a small island nation. Beside him, his wife, Sarah, looked effortlessly beautiful in a beige trench coat and leggings, holding the hand of their 6-year-old daughter, Maya. Maya was clutching a stuffed rabbit by the ears, her eyes wide as she looked at the massive planes taxiing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Daddy, is that our plane?" Maya asked, pointing to a sleek Boeing 777-300ER, painted in the midnight blue and silver livery of Aerolux Airways. David smiled, a warm, genuine expression that softened the sharp angles of his face. "That's the one, baby girl. We're going to London." "Are the seats beds?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. "Flat beds, ice cream sundaes, the works," Sarah whispered, smoothing Maya's hair. They approached the boarding gate, designated Priority A. The line was short, populated mostly by men in bespoke suits and women carrying handbags that cost more than most cars. David stepped forward, his digital boarding pass pulled up on his phone. Standing at the podium wasn't the usual gate agent. It was Gavin Thorne. Gavin Thorne was a man who wore his authority like a suit of armor that was 2 sizes too tight. He was the regional manager for the East Coast, a position he had clawed his way into by cutting costs and enforcing regulations with draconian glee. He had slicked back hair, a tie that was aggressively red, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Today, he was personally overseeing the boarding of Flight 109 to Heathrow because the airline's VP of operations was rumored to be flying out later that week, and Thorne wanted everything perfect. When David stepped up to the scanner, Thorne didn't look at the QR code. He looked at David. His gaze traveled from the sneakers to the hoodie, lingered on Sarah's relaxed attire, and settled on the family's skin color. Thorne put a hand over the scanner. "Hold on," Thorne said. His voice was smooth, practiced, and dripping with condescension. "Boarding is by group number. We're currently boarding Group 1. First class and Diamond Medallion members only." David didn't blink. He held the phone steady. "I know. We're in 1A, 1K, and 2A. Thorne let out a short, incredulous breath, a laugh stifled into a sigh. He looked over David's shoulder, addressing the businessman standing behind them. "Apologies, Mr. Henderson. We'll get this sorted in a moment." Then, his eyes snapped back to David. "Sir, I need you to step aside. You're blocking the priority lane." "I have my tickets," David said, his voice level. "Scan them? Tickets can be forged. Screenshots can be doctored," Thorne said, leaning over the podium. He didn't lower his voice. "Look, let's save everyone the embarrassment. This happens more often than you'd think. People try to sneak into the priority queue to grab overhead bin space. But this isn't Spirit Airlines. This is Aerolux, the economy cabin group, 5 boards in 40 minutes. Downstairs." Sarah stepped up, her hand tightening on David's arm, sensing the tension radiating off him. "Excuse me? We purchased these tickets 3 days ago. Full fare." Thorne smirked at her. "Full fare. First class to London is $15,000 a seat. That's $45,000 for a one-way trip." He looked them up and down again, making a show of it. "Now, I'm not the fashion police, but I know what our clientele looks like, and frankly, you people, you don't fit the profile." The lounge went quiet. the clinking of silverware stopped. Mr. Henderson, the businessman behind them, checked his watch and sighed loudly. "Come on, let's move it along." David didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't make a scene. He simply looked Gavin Thorne in the eye. "My name is David Sterling. Scan the code." Thorne's face hardened. He was used to people shrinking away when he exerted authority. He wasn't used to this kind of stillness. It felt dangerous. But Thorne was a man who doubled down. "I'm not scanning anything," Thorne snapped. "I'm calling security. You're trespassing in a premium area and harassing staff." "Harassing?" Sarah asked, her voice rising in disbelief. "We are trying to board a plane we paid for." "You can't afford this flight," Thorne finally shouted, the mask slipping. "I don't know whose credit card you stole or what glitch you exploited, but there is no way I am letting you onto my flagship aircraft. Now, get your things and get out of my line before I have you banned from the airport." David stared at him for a long, agonizing second. Then, slowly, he put his phone back in his pocket. "You're making a mistake, Gavin," David said. He read the name tag. "That's Mr. Thorne to you. And the only mistake here is you thinking you could pull a fast one on me." Thorne gestured to the gate agents. "Call Port Authority. Tell them we have a disturbance at Gate 4. The atmosphere at the gate shifted from impatient to electric. The scent of luxury was replaced by the sour smell of conflict. Passengers in the line were pulling out their phones. The red recording lights blinked like tiny, accusatory eyes. David turned to Sarah. "Take Maya and sit over there by the window," he said softly. "David, no," Sarah whispered. "Let's just show him the confirmation email. He doesn't care about the email, Sarah," David said, his eyes never leaving Thorne's face. "This isn't about the ticket anymore." Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She guided a confused Maya to a leather armchair a few feet away. "It's okay, baby. Daddy's just talking to the man." Thorne watched them move with a smug satisfaction. He thought he had won. He thought they were retreating. He turned to Mr. Henderson. "So sorry about that, sir. We have to be vigilant. Security is our top priority." "Scan me through, Thorne," Henderson grumbled. "I have a merger to close in London." "Wait," David said. He hadn't moved. He was standing right next to the podium, blocking Henderson's path to the scanner. Thorne's face turned a violent shade of red. "I told you to leave, and I told you to scan my ticket," David said. "But since you refused, I'd like to speak to your superior." Thorne threw his head back and laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "My superior? I am the regional manager. I run the East Coast operations for Aerolux. There is no one else here. I am the law at this gate, Mr. Sterling, and I am telling you that your tickets are invalid." "Check the system," David challenged. "Type in my name, Sterling. Thorne, fueled by the audience and his own prejudice, decided to humiliate David once and for all. "Fine, I'll prove it to you." He hammered on the keyboard with aggressive strokes. Sterling, David." The screen blinked. Thorne frowned. He hit the enter key again. A profile popped up. It didn't have the usual economy or business tag. It had a flashing gold banner that said VIP, do not offload. Under the status column, it didn't list platinum or gold. It listed a code Thorne had never seen before, OWN001. Thorne blinked. He assumed it was a system error. The system had been buggy since the merger talk started last month. "See?" Thorne lied, turning the screen away so David couldn't see it. "System error. Fraudulent transaction code. It says right here, payment pending verification. You probably used a stolen card, and the bank clawed it back." "That's a lie," David said calmly. "Are you calling me a liar?" Thorne stepped around the podium, getting into David's personal space. Thorne was a tall man, but David, though shorter, was built like a linebacker. "You're a scammer. I see guys like you every day. You think because you put on a clean hoodie you can walk among the elite? You're disrupting my operation." Two Port Authority police officers came jogging down the concourse, their radios crackling. "Here we go," Thorne said, grinning. "Officers, over here." The officers, Officer Miller and Officer Davis, approached cautiously. They saw a well-dressed white man in a suit pointing an accusing finger at a black man in a hoodie. They fell into the rhythm of the situation instantly. "What seems to be the problem?" Officer Miller asked, his hand resting near his belt. This man is refusing to leave the boarding area, Thorne said, straightening his tie. He possesses fraudulent tickets and is harassing my premium passengers. I've asked him to leave 3 times. Now I want him trespassed. Officer Miller turned to David. Sir, is this true? I have a valid ticket, David said, holding up his phone again. This man refuses to scan it because he doesn't think I can afford it. It's not about what he thinks, sir, Officer Davis said. If the airline says you can't fly, you can't fly. It's a private business. You need to come with us. I am flying on this plane, David said. He wasn't shouting, but his voice carried a weight that made Officer Miller pause. And if you remove me, you will be making a very expensive mistake for the city of New York. Threatening an officer? Thorne chimed in. Add that to the report. I'm not threatening, David said. I'm stating a fact. Check the manifest yourself, officer. Thorne interjected. I already checked. It's a fraud code. Let the officer check, David said. Officer Miller looked between the 2 men. Sir, he said to Thorne, just to be thorough, scan the ticket in front of me. Thorne huffed. This is a waste of time. He grabbed the handheld scanner and snatched David's phone. He aimed the laser at the QR code. Beep. A green light flashed on the scanner. A cheerful chime sounded. The small screen on the scanner read, Seat 1A, welcome back, Mr. Ling. The silence that followed was deafening. Thorne stared at the scanner. He shook it, as if it were broken. It's a glitch. The system is overriding the fraud alert. It's green, Officer Miller said. Green means go, right? It's a hack, Thorne insisted, panic starting to fringe the edges of his voice. He's hacked the app. I'm telling you. Look at him. Does he look like he owns a seat in first class? David stepped forward and took his phone back from Thorne's trembling hand. I'd like to board now. Unless you want to arrest a passenger with a valid boarding pass in front of 50 witnesses filming this? Officer Miller stepped back. Seems valid to me, Mr. Thorne. If you want to kick him off, that's your internal policy, but we're not arresting him for trespassing if he has a ticket. Thorne's jaw worked silently. He knew he was losing control. If he let David board now, after making such a scene, he would look weak, he would look incompetent. Fine, Thorne hissed. Get on the plane. But don't get comfortable. I'm coming with you. I'm going to have the captain verify this manually against the flight load sheet. If there is one discrepancy, 1 digit out of place, I will have you dragged off by your ankles. David gestured to Sarah and Maya. They stood up and walked over. Sarah held her head high, refusing to look at Thorne. Maya clutched her rabbit tight. As they walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting their faces, Sarah whispered, David, please tell me you're going to end him. David adjusted his cuff. I'm not going to end him, Sarah. I'm going to teach him a lesson about ownership. The cabin of the Aerolux Boeing 777 was a marvel of modern engineering. The first-class suites were enclosed by sliding mahogany doors, featuring hand-stitched Italian leather seats that converted into full beds. Soft ambient lighting shifted from sunrise orange to calming violet. Chloe, the lead flight attendant, was arranging the welcome drinks Dom Perignon 2012 when David and his family stepped onto the plane. Chloe had been flying for 20 years. She had seen rock stars, politicians, and lottery winners. She had a sixth sense for people. When she saw David, she didn't see a fraud. She saw a tired father. She smiled warmly. Welcome aboard, Mr. Sterling. Mrs. Sterling, she said, checking her tablet. And this must be Maya. I have a special amenity kit for you, sweetie. Maya smiled shyly. Does it have the pilot wings? Gold ones, Chloe winked. Wait a minute. Gavin Thorne stormed onto the plane, his face slick with sweat. He nearly knocked over a tray of hot towels. The peaceful ambiance of the cabin shattered. Chloe, don't serve them, Thorne barked. Chloe blinked, holding the champagne bottle. Excuse me, Mr. Thorne? These passengers are under investigation for ticket fraud. Do not serve them alcohol. Do not unpack their bags. I am verifying their status with the cockpit. Thorne pointed a finger at David, who was already settling into seat 1A. Don't get comfortable. David ignored him. He took off his hoodie, revealing a plain black t-shirt underneath. Chloe, could I get a sparkling water with lime, please? And apple juice for my daughter. I said no service, Thorne shouted. Passengers in business class, just behind the curtain, were craning their necks. A famous tech YouTuber, sitting in 2F, had his camera discreetly pointed through the gap in the seats. Chloe stiffened. She was a union rep, and she didn't take kindly to being shouted at, even by management. "Mr. Thorne, they are seated passengers. Until the captain tells me otherwise, they are my guests. And you are shouting in my first-class cabin. I am your boss," Thorne seethed. "Technically," David said, reclining his seat slightly, "you're middle management. There's a difference." Thorne spun on him. "You think you're funny? You think this is a game? I run this region. I can ground this plane." "Then do it," David said. "Go tell Captain Reynolds to ground the flight because a black family is sitting in the seats they paid for." Thorne turned purple. He marched to the cockpit door and banged on it. The door opened, and Captain Reynolds, a silver-haired veteran with 4 stripes on his shoulder, stepped out. He looked annoyed. "What is going on out here, Gavin? We're trying to run pre-flight checks." "Captain, we have a security breach," Thorne said, breathless. "These passengers," he gestured wildly at the Sterlings, "have bypassed the gate checks using a hacked app. The system flagged them, but the police refused to act. I need you to order their removal under the commander's authority." Captain Reynolds looked at David. He looked at the calm demeanor, the frightened child, and the furious manager. "Did they pass the TSA checkpoint?" Reynolds asked. "Yes, but did they have a valid boarding pass at the gate?" The scanner turned green. "But it's a hack," Thorne insisted. "Look at them, Reynolds. Does that look like the demographic for a $15,000 seat? We have to protect the brand integrity." The cabin went silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop humming. Captain Reynolds' eyes narrowed. He had flown with David Sterling before, years ago, on a different airline, though he didn't recognize him immediately out of a suit. But he recognized racism when he heard it. "Gavin," Reynolds said, his voice low and dangerous, "are you asking me to remove a passenger based on their demographic?" "I'm asking you to remove them because they can't possibly afford this," Thorne yelled, losing all semblance of professionalism. "And if you don't, I'll file a report on you too. Insubordination, complicity in fraud. I'll strip those stripes off your shoulder." Sarah gripped David's hand. Her knuckles were white. "David," she whispered, "do it now." David nodded. He unbuckled his seatbelt. "Sit down," Thorne screamed. "Security, get back on the plane." The 2 police officers, who had been lingering in the jet bridge just in case, stepped into the galley. "Officer," Thorne said, pointing a shaking finger at David. "He's becoming aggressive. He's standing up. He's a threat to the flight crew. Take him off." David stood up fully. He didn't lunge. He didn't shout. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a titanium business card holder. "I'm not aggressive," David said to the officers. "I'm just trying to make a phone call. Because it seems Mr. Thorne here hasn't checked his email this week." "No phones." Thorne lunged for David's hand. David sidestepped him effortlessly. Thorne stumbled and crashed into the galley wall, knocking over a basket of biscotti. "Assault!" Thorne shrieked. "He pushed me. You saw it." "He didn't touch you," Chloe said, her voice ice-cold. "You tripped." David tapped a contact on his phone. He put it on speaker and held it up. The ringtone echoed through the silent cabin. "Ring. Ring. Who are you calling?" Thorne sneered, straightening his tie. "Your lawyer?" "It won't help." The line clicked. A voice, crisp and British, boomed through the speaker. "David, is that you? We weren't expecting you in London until tomorrow." Thorne froze. He recognized that voice. Everyone in Aerolux recognized that voice. It was Arthur Pendleton, the chairman of the board, the man who had founded the airline 30 years ago. "Hey, Arthur," David said, his voice casual. "Change of plans. I'm on flight 109 out of JFK. Or, I'm trying to be." "Trying?" Arthur asked. "Is there a delay?" "Mechanical?" "No," David said, looking directly at Gavin Thorne. "Personnel. I've got a regional manager here named Gavin Thorne who is refusing to let me fly. He says I can't afford the seat." There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy pause. He said, "What?" Arthur's voice dropped an octave. "He's currently trying to have me arrested for fraud. He told the captain to remove me because I don't fit the demographic. He also threatened to strip the captain's stripes." Thorne's face went from purple to a ghostly, sickly white. He began to shake his head frantically, mouthing, "No, no, no." "Arthur?" David continued. "Did the memo go out?" About the acquisition? It went out at 9 a.m. this morning, David, Arthur said. Global distribution. Every employee with an email address received it. Well, David said. Mr. Thorne seems to have missed it. Could you explain it to him? Put him on, Arthur commanded. David held the phone out to Thorne. Thorne didn't want to take it. His hands were trembling so badly he almost dropped it. Mr. Pendleton? Thorne squeaked. Thorne. Arthur's voice was like a thunderclap. Do you know who you are speaking to? Yes, sir. It's a misunderstanding. I was just trying to protect the company assets. Protect the assets? Arthur interrupted. You imbecile. You are talking to the asset. David Sterling isn't a passenger. His private equity firm, Sterling Capital, purchased Aerolux Airways last week. The ink is dry. The transfer is complete. Thorne's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the galley counter to hold himself up. The flight attendants gasped. The YouTuber in 2F zoomed in. David Sterling owns the plane. Thorne, Arthur continued, his voice ringing with absolute finality. He owns the seats. He owns the fuel. He owns the logo on your tie. He owns the airline. The silence that descended on the first-class cabin of Flight 109 was heavier than gravity. It was the kind of silence that happens when the world shifts on its axis, when the predator suddenly realizes they are locked in a cage with the apex beast. Gavin Thorne stared at the phone in his hand as if it were a live grenade. He bought it? 100% controlling interest. Arthur's voice crackled. Now, put Mr. Sterling back on. Thorne handed the phone back to David. He moved like a sleepwalker, his eyes wide and unfocused. He looked at David, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the quiet confidence, the lack of need to shout. He realized, with a sinking horror, that the hoodie was probably cashmere and cost more than Thorne's monthly rent. David took the phone. I'm here, Arthur. David, I am mortified, Arthur said. This is not the culture we built. Do what you need to do. Thanks, Arthur. I'll see you in London for the board meeting. David hung up. David slipped the phone into his pocket. He turned to the two police officers, who were now looking at Thorne with a mixture of pity and disgust. Officers, David said, I own this aircraft. Do you still believe I'm trespassing? Officer Miller chuckled, a dry sound. No, sir. I think we're good here. Mr. Thorne, do you have any other crimes to report? Thorne didn't answer. He couldn't speak. David turned to Captain Reynolds. Captain, I apologize for the delay. I know you have a slot time to hit. Are we cleared to fly? Captain Reynolds grinned. He tipped his cap. We're cleared, Mr. Sterling. Welcome aboard. It's an honor to have the new chairman with us. Thank you, Captain. David finally turned his attention to Gavin Thorne. Thorne was backed into the corner of the galley, surrounded by the flight attendants he had mistreated, the police he had manipulated, and the passengers he had disturbed. He looked small. The arrogance had evaporated, leaving behind a sweaty, terrified man in a cheap suit. Mr. Sterling, Thorne stammered, his voice cracking. Sir, I didn't know. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me with respect? David finished the sentence for him. No, I mean, it's policy to be careful. Thorne was drowning. I was just doing my job. I have a family, sir. Please. David stepped closer. You weren't doing your job, Gavin. Your job is to facilitate travel. Your job is hospitality. What you were doing was profiling. You looked at me, and you saw someone who didn't belong. You looked at my daughter, my 6-year-old daughter, and decided she wasn't good enough to sit in this cabin. I was stressed. It's been a long week, Thorne pleaded. I can fix this. I'll upgrade you. I'll comp the champagne. You can't upgrade the owner, Sarah said from her seat. Her voice was sharp. And we don't want your champagne. David sighed. He didn't look angry anymore. He just looked disappointed. Gavin, you said earlier that you wanted to protect the brand integrity. I agree with you. Aerolux needs to stand for excellence. Inclusion, respect. David looked at the badge on Thorne's chest. And you don't fit the profile, David said, echoing Thorne's earlier words. Sir, please, Thorne whispered. Tears were welling in his eyes. Don't fire me. Not here. Not like this. I'm not going to fire you right now, David said. Thorne let out a ragged breath of relief. Thank you. Thank you, sir. I promise. I will earn this back. I'm not firing you, David continued, because I'm on vacation. And I don't work on vacation. but you are currently a security risk. You are agitated, irrational, and you've harassed passengers. David turned to Officer Miller. Officer, I'd like this man removed from my aircraft. He is disrupting the flight crew and causing a scene. The color drained from Thorne's face completely. What? You can't. I'm the manager. Not on this plane, David said. On this plane, you're just a liability. Officer Miller stepped forward, a grim smile on his face. He grabbed Thorne's arm. All right, Mr. Thorne. Let's go. You heard the owner. No, you can't do this. Thorne started to struggle. I need to go to London. The VP is expecting me. The VP works for me now, too, David said calmly. I'll let him know why you didn't make it. Thorne was dragged down the aisle. He passed the first-class seats. He passed Mr. Henderson, who shook his head and sipped his drink. He passed the YouTuber, who was filming the entire walk of shame. This is illegal. I'll sue, Thorne screamed as they reached the jet bridge door. Mind your head, Officer Davis said, ducking him under the doorframe. As the door clicked shut, sealing the noise of Thorne's tantrum outside, the cabin let out a collective breath. Chloe looked at David. She was beaming. Mr. Sterling. That was. I've been waiting 10 years for someone to do that. David smiled tiredly. I'm sorry you had to deal with him, Chloe. From now on, things are going to be different around here. Can I get you that sparkling water now? She asked. Please, David said. He sat down and buckled his seatbelt. Maya looked up from her coloring book. Daddy, is the bad man gone? Yes, honey, David said, kissing her forehead. The bad man is gone. Did you buy the plane really? She asked. I did. Does that mean I can have 2 ice creams? David laughed, the tension finally leaving his shoulders. You can have as many as you want. As the plane pushed back from the gate, David looked out the window. He saw Gavin Thorne standing on the tarmac below, arguing with the baggage handlers, his tie undone, looking up at the massive machine that was leaving him behind. David didn't feel triumph. He felt a resolve. He pulled out his notebook and wrote down one line. Review HR policies. Immediate audit of management staff. The engines roared to life, a deep, powerful thrum that shook the floorboards. Flight 109 was ready for takeoff. But for Gavin Thorne, the descent had just begun. At 38,000 feet, the world below is nothing but a patchwork of clouds and ocean, detached from the petty grievances of men like Gavin Thorne. Inside the cabin of Flight 109, however, the atmosphere was thick with a different kind of pressure, the pressure of a sudden, violent shift in the hierarchy. David Sterling sat in seat 1A, watching the condensation trails form on the reinforced glass of the window. The adrenaline of the confrontation at the gate was fading, replaced by the dull ache of exhaustion. He hadn't slept in 24 hours, having spent the previous night finalizing the acquisition documents with his legal team in Manhattan. Mr. Sterling? David turned. It was Chloe, the flight attendant. Her hands were shaking slightly as she placed a crystal tumbler of sparkling water on his tray table. Please, call me David, he said, offering a gentle smile. And you don't need to be nervous. I'm not going to fire anyone. Unless you spill that water on my wife. Chloe laughed, a sound of genuine relief. I won't, sir. David, I wanted to thank you for what you did back there. Mr. Thorne has been difficult for a long time. David took a sip of the water. Define difficult. Chloe looked around to ensure the other passengers were occupied. The cabin was dim, most window shades drawn. He cut our layover times in London from 24 hours to 12 to save on hotel costs. He mandated that we weigh ourselves before every shift brand image, he called it. He fired a girl last month, a single mother, because her uniform had a wrinkle in it during a surprise inspection. He called it maintaining the Aerolux standard. David's grip on the glass tightened. Weighing staff? That's illegal in 3 different jurisdictions. He said if we didn't like it, we could go fly for Spirit, Chloe whispered. He said he was untouchable because he saved the company $2 million last quarter. He saved $2 million by stealing your dignity, David murmured. He pulled a small leather-bound notebook from his pocket and clicked his pen. What was the name of the woman he fired? Rebecca Lewis. Write it down for me later, David said, and get me her contact info. As Chloe walked away, Sarah reached across the aisle from seat 1K. She took David's hand. You're already working, she teased softly, though her eyes were proud. We haven't even crossed the Atlantic yet. I bought a broken thing, Sarah, David sighed. I thought I was buying an airline with a branding problem. Turns out, I bought a sweatshop with wings. You'll fix it? She said. You always do. Remember when you bought that failing logistics company in Detroit? Everyone said it was dead. Now it employs 4,000 people. That was boxes, David said. This is people. And egos. From 2 rows back, a young man in a graphic tee and a backwards baseball cap unbuckled his seatbelt and approached cautiously. He held a professional-grade camera in one hand and a smartphone in the other. This was Leo Tech Trends Vance, a YouTuber with 6 million subscribers known for reviewing luxury travel and tech. Mr. Sterling? Leo whispered. David looked up. Yes? I'm Leo. I run a channel called Tech Trends. I caught the whole thing on camera. The gate, the argument, the phone call with Arthur Pendleton. David raised an eyebrow. I saw you filming. Leo hesitated. I have it edited. I use the plane's Wi-Fi. It's ready to upload. But, honestly, usually, I just post it for the views. But this felt personal. I wanted to ask permission before I hit publish. It's pretty intense. David looked at the phone Leo was holding. On the screen was a thumbnail image of Gavin Thorne's red, screaming face next to David's calm demeanor, with the title, CEO Kicked Off His Own Plane. Instant karma. Let me see it, David said. Leo handed over the phone. David watched the 3-minute clip. It was brutal. It showed Thorne's sneering condescension, the racial profiling, the way he dismissed the police, and finally, the earth-shattering moment Arthur Pendleton's voice came over the speakerphone. It was a masterpiece of verite drama. It's accurate, David said, handing the phone back. Is that a yes? Leo asked. David looked at Sarah. She nodded slightly. Upload it, David said. The truth is free, Leo. And Mr. Thorne wanted to make sure everyone knew his policies. Let's help him with his marketing. Leo grinned. You got it, boss. He walked back to his seat. 3 minutes later, the video was live. Meanwhile, 3,000 miles behind them, at JFK Terminal 4, the reality of Gavin Thorne's situation was beginning to set in. Thorne was standing at the ticketing counter of British Airways, sweating through his shirt. He had been escorted out of the Aerolux terminal by Port Authority, stripped of his security badge, and dumped curbside. His company phone had been remotely locked 10 minutes ago. He was desperate. He had to get to London. He had to get to the board meeting before David Sterling did. He needed to spin the narrative. He would tell the board that Sterling was aggressive, that he provoked the incident, that Thorne was the victim of a hostile work environment. I need a one-way ticket to Heathrow. Thorne barked at the British Airways agent. A patient woman named Margaret. First class. Next flight out. Certainly, sir, Margaret said, typing. That will be $12,000. Thorne slapped his corporate Aerolux American Express black card on the counter. Charge it. Margaret swiped the card. She waited. Declined. Try it again, Thorne snapped. It's a corporate card. It has no limit. She swiped it again. Declined. Contact issuer. It seems the card has been deactivated, sir, Margaret said. That's impossible, Thorne yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. I am the regional manager. Do you know who I am? Margaret looked at him over her glasses. She had worked at JFK for 30 years. She had seen kings and paupers. She wasn't impressed by a mid-level manager with a bad haircut. Sir, if you raise your voice again, I will call security, she said. Thorne fumbled for his personal wallet. He pulled out his personal Visa. It had a limit of $5,000. He had maxed it out last month on a Rolex he couldn't actually afford, trying to look the part of the executive he desperately wanted to be. How much for economy? Thorne whispered, his voice trembling. 1,200, Margaret said. Thorne swallowed his pride. It tasted like bile. He bought the ticket. Seat 42E. Middle seat. Back of the plane. Next to the lavatory. As he sat in the terminal waiting for his flight, he opened his personal phone to check Twitter. He wanted to see if anyone was talking about the incident. He opened the app. The #1 trending topic in the United States was Aerolux owner. The #2 topic was Gavin Thorne Eyes Racist. He clicked the hashtag. The first video was Leo's upload. It already had 4.5 million views. Thorne watched himself on the tiny screen. He saw the hate in his own eyes. He saw the moment his career evaporated. He scrolled down to the comments. Asterisk at Flyboy99. I used to work for Thorn. Guy is a monster. Glad he finally got checked. Asterisk at Legal Eagle. This is the easiest lawsuit I've ever seen. Aerolux stock is going to tank if they don't fire him immediately. Asterisk at Sarah J. The way he looked at that little girl. Disgusting. Boycott Thorn. Thorn dropped the phone. It clattered to the floor. People in the waiting area looked at him. A teenager sitting opposite him narrowed his eyes, then looked at his own phone, then back at Thorn. Hey, the kid said, pointing his phone at Thorn. Aren't you the guy from the video? Thorn pulled his jacket over his head and ran toward the bathroom. Flight 109 touched down at Heathrow at 7:30 a.m. local time. The landing was smooth, the kind of arrival that felt like an exhale. As the plane taxied to the gate, the captain came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to London. On behalf of the crew, and especially our new chairman, Mr. Sterling, we thank you for flying Aerolux. A ripple of applause broke out in the cabin. It wasn't polite applause, it was genuine. When the jet bridge connected, Arthur Pendleton was waiting right at the aircraft door. Arthur was a legend in aviation, a tall, silver-haired Brit with impeccable tailoring and a cane he used more for dramatic effect than necessity. David, Arthur said, extending a hand. I see you've already started shaking things up. I didn't intend to, Arthur, David said, shaking the hand firmly. But the rot was deeper than the balance sheet showed. I saw the video, Arthur said grimly as they walked through the terminal. It's horrifying. The board has been convened. Emergency session, 10 a.m. Is Thorn here? David asked. He's in the air. Flying economy, on BA. He lands in an hour. He sent a frantic email from the lounge, claiming the video was deep-faked by AI. David laughed. A dry, humorless sound. Of course he did. They took a waiting black car to the Aerolux global headquarters in Hounslow. The building was a glass and steel monolith, a testament to the airline's golden era. But inside, the mood was tense. Staff members huddled in corridors, whispering. When they saw David, they stopped and stared. They didn't know if he was a savior or an executioner. David walked into the boardroom. It was a cavernous space with a table that could seat 30. The walls were lined with oil paintings of past CEOs. The current board members, 6 men and 4 women, representing billions of dollars in investment capital, were already seated. They looked nervous. David didn't sit at the head of the table. He sat in the middle, next to Arthur. Let's begin, David said. The large screen at the end of the room flickered to life. It was connected to a Zoom call. We have Mr. Thorn on audio link from the Heathrow Express train, the secretary announced. He just landed. Thorn, David said, his voice amplified by the room's speakers. You're on speaker with the board. Mr. Sterling, Arthur. Thorn's voice came through, breathless and distorted by the train's noise. Please, you have to listen to me. That video is edited. That YouTuber is a known provocateur. I was following protocol. Protocol? A board member named Beatrice snapped. Is it protocol to tell the owner of the company he can't afford a ticket based on his skin color? I didn't say it was his skin color. I said it was the demographic, Thorn yelled. We have data. Fraud is high in that demographic. Stop, David said. The room went silent. Gavin, you are digging a hole you can't climb out of, David said quietly. We have the logs. We have the witness statements from the police officers you tried to manipulate. We have the statement from Captain Reynolds. I was protecting the company, Thorn insisted. No, David said. You were protecting your ego, and in doing so, you wiped $400 million off our market cap in pre-market trading this morning. The advertisers are pulling out. The public is calling for a boycott. I can fix it. Let me do a press conference, Thorn pleaded. You will never speak for this company again, David said. David slid a folder across the table to the legal counsel. This is the termination order. Cause, gross misconduct, fiduciary negligence, discrimination, and brand damage. You can't fire me for cause, Thorn shrieked. I have a contract. I have a severance package. If you fire me, I want my golden parachute. $2 million. David leaned into the microphone. Gavin, you aren't getting a parachute. You aren't even getting a bus fare. We are firing you for cause. which voids your severance. Furthermore, Aerolux Legal is currently filing a civil suit against you for the damages to the brand. We are suing you for $50 million. There was silence on the line. Then, a distinct sound of a phone being dropped. Then, nothing. He hung up, Arthur noted dryly. He has bigger problems than a phone call, David said. He stood up and looked at the board. Now, let's talk about the future. I want a complete audit of all HR complaints from the last 5 years. I want the weight check policy abolished immediately. And I want Rebecca Lewis rehired with back pay and an apology letter signed by everyone in this room. The board members nodded. They realized, quickly, that Aerolux was no longer run by committees and spreadsheets. It was run by a man who had a moral compass, and he wasn't afraid to use it as a weapon. The fall of Gavin Thorne was not a slow decline. It was a cliff-edge drop. In the viral age, karma moves at the speed of light. By the time Thorne got off the train at Paddington Station, he wasn't just unemployed, he was radioactive. The video had been picked up by CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera. It was everywhere. The phrase, "You can't afford this flight," became a meme, plastered on t-shirts and mocked on late-night talk shows. SNL did a skit about it that weekend. Thorne tried to sue. He hired a strip mall lawyer who promised him he could win a wrongful termination suit. The Aerolux legal team, led by top-tier barristers, buried him in paperwork. They exposed every skeleton in his closet: the embezzlement of petty cash, the falsified performance reviews, the harassment complaints he had swept under the rug. Thorne lost his house in the Hamptons. He lost his apartment in the city. His wife, humiliated by the public shaming and the revelation of his secret debts, filed for divorce 3 months later. She took the kids and moved to Vermont. 6 months after the incident, a journalist found Gavin Thorne working as a night shift dispatcher for a trucking company in New Jersey. When asked for a comment, he simply slammed the door. He had become a cautionary tale in business schools, a case study titled "The Thorne Effect: How Arrogance Destroys Assets." But for David Sterling and Aerolux, the trajectory was the opposite. David didn't just rehire Rebecca Lewis. He made her the head of the new employee experience department. He implemented a blind recruitment policy to eliminate bias in hiring. He redesigned the first-class cabins to be more inclusive, partnering with minority-owned businesses for the amenities and catering. The stock price didn't just recover, it doubled. People wanted to fly the airline that stood for something. They wanted to support the anti-Thorne. 1 year later, David stood on the tarmac at JFK. It was the anniversary of the incident. He was there to unveil the new livery of the aircraft. Beside him was Maya, now 7, holding her stuffed rabbit. "Daddy, look," she pointed. The nose of the new Boeing 787 Dreamliner was painted with a name. It wasn't named after a city or a star. It was named the Spirit of Rebecca. David smiled. He looked at the gate where it all happened. The old podium was gone, replaced by a sleek, open-plan desk. The staff behind it were smiling, diverse, and relaxed. He thought about the nature of power. Thorne had thought power was a wall, something you build to keep people out. David knew the truth. Power was a door, and the only thing that mattered was who you held it open for. The real-world connection. While the story of David Sterling and Gavin Thorne is a dramatization, it mirrors the very real and often brutal reality of the aviation industry. In 2018, a similar incident occurred involving a major U.S. carrier where 2 African-American men were removed from a flight simply for requesting a seat change, sparking a global conversation about racial profiling in the skies. Moreover, the hostile takeover aspect reflects the legendary moves of tycoons like Carl Icahn with TWA or the rebranding genius of Sir Richard Branson with Virgin Atlantic. Branson famously started his airline because he was frustrated with a canceled flight and leased a plane on the spot, jokingly writing Virgin Airways on a blackboard. He proved that an airline runs on customer experience, not just jet fuel. The legal statutes mentioned specifically regarding denied boarding and Title 14 of the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR, are real. Airlines have broad authority to remove passengers, but that authority stops at discrimination. The contract of carriage is a binding document, but it does not supersede civil rights laws. David Sterling's victory wasn't just about money, it was about the enforcement of dignity. In the real world, we don't always get to buy the airline to solve the problem. But the rise of social media, the Leo Vance factor, has democratized justice. Today, a camera phone is more powerful than a corporate badge. Gavin Thorne represents the old guard, the gatekeepers who believe exclusivity is about exclusion. David Sterling represents the new guard, the leaders who know that true exclusivity is about the quality of the soul, not the limit of the credit card. As the new Aerolux plane took off, soaring over the Manhattan skyline, it carried more than passengers. It carried a message that in the modern world, you never know who you are talking to. The man in the hoodie might be the king, the woman in the trench coat might be the boss, and the person you try to keep down might just be the one who owns the sky. The story of David Sterling is a reminder that dignity is not a commodity, it is a right. We live in a world where appearances often mask reality and where judgment is passed in seconds. But as we saw with Gavin Thorne, those who judge the quickest often fall the hardest. True power isn't about how loud you can yell or how many rules you can enforce. It's about how you treat people when you think no one is watching. David didn't just buy an airline. He bought back respect for every passenger who has ever been looked down upon. He showed us that sometimes the best revenge isn't anger, it's excellence. It's living well, succeeding, and changing the system from the inside out. So the next time you're at an airport, look around. Be kind. Because you never know, the person standing next to you might just be the one who signs your paycheck tomorrow. If this story fired you up, if you believe in justice served cold and karma served hot, then smash that like button right now. It helps the algorithm share this message with more people. Have you ever been judged or mistreated by someone on a power trip? I want to hear your story. Drop a comment below. Let's expose the Gavin Thornes of the world together. And don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell. We have a massive story coming next week about a waitress who was denied a tip by a billionaire only to find out she was his long-lost daughter. You do not want to miss it. Thanks for watching, and remember, fly high, but stay humble.